Hi and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Metro, one of my favorite franchises of all time. Metro is a post-apocalyptic game and novel series. We are going to be focusing mainly on the game side of things. However, I do want to note that the first novel, Metro 2033, which got adapted into the game Metro 2033, is actually completely free and you can go and download it right now. I've left a link to it in the description. Secondly, I think it's kind of interesting that after Last Light, the book 2034 was written after that game came out, so Last Light is no longer an adaptation, but the book is kind of fleshing out the universe. I think that's pretty interesting, and it's the same thing for Exodus as far as I was able to research. But all that being said, the games are fantastic, and I hope you'll enjoy this video. It's been a behemoth to make, and without further ado, I hope you'll enjoy, and I'll see you on the other side. Metro 2033 is the video game adaptation of the novel by the same name. It is dark and gritty, and one of the most fascinating and immersive games I think I've ever played. Metro 2033, while at this point being pretty old, is a game that does a lot of things incredibly well, including things like its gunplay, but also basic survival horror and resource management, along with a great linear campaign that effectively adopts the novel into video game form. But before we can get into any of that, we need to talk a little bit about what the Metro universe actually is. In the Metro universe, World War III has both happened and ended in 2013 with a nuclear holocaust killing most of the world's population. The people who survived have seeked underground, specifically in the case of metros within the metro system of Moscow. And within that metro system, different factions have popped up. There are neo-Nazis and a Red Stalinist group, and on top of that, there's also different mutants and so on within these systems. It is a dark universe. The world doesn't exist anymore, yet there are glimmers of hope at times. It's also a franchise that is not entirely unpolitical. It speaks a lot about the different issues and so on with the different political systems. The actual gameplay of Metro 2033 is first-person shooter at its height. You can die very quickly if you aren't careful, and you can use your currency as a form of ammunition. This is where the resource management part of it comes in. You see, in a world where normal currency is virtually valueless, the world has started to trade in MGRs, or military-grade rounds, which are an incredibly powerful version of the ammunition that you have, which you can use on different monsters and so on if needed. This is often not recommended, because those same rounds are what is gonna buy you your weapon upgrades, your ammunition, other ammunition to your guns, and of course new guns, which are all necessary if you want to survive the downright brutal world that is Metro. You see, unlike in a lot of other popular post-apocalypse fiction, the apocalypse here isn't fun or nice in any way. In Metro, you need gas masks to even be able to go into the above world. Everything is irradiated. Moscow is in ruins. There aren't a lot of people above ground, if any. The only people who have managed to make bases and holds out above ground are the people who are already in established groups, such as the Rangers that you end up being a part of. In general, most of the game will be taking place underground. Underground in the metro system, you're gonna get to see a dark, tight, a little claustrophobic metro system where everything is out to get you, and while it can feel so small, it also feels incredibly vast in just the sheer scale of the metro systems that run under Moscow. It is such an interesting setting for a game, and on top of that you will also see a lot of the different ideologies play out, both fascists and communists. Now, the actual plot doesn't directly revolve around them yet, but it does have them in the world. However, the main plot of the story goes something like: despite the bombs dropping in 2013, our story doesn't begin until 2033, where you play as Artyom, a 24-year-old survivor and the adopted son of a station commander. who have just been asked for help by an elite ranger to support him on his mission to hunt the Dark Ones by taking his dog tags, Polis, the capital of the Metro. The day after, Artyom signs on as a guard for caravan headed towards Riga, a neighboring station. However, along the way, the entire crew is incapacitated by a psychic attack. However, Artyom does not feel any effect. This is a central plot point through the next 2 games, where Artyom has a special connection with this so-called psychic attacker, who will end up being the Dark Ones. After the caravans get to safety, Artyom meets Bourbon, who's a smuggler. He offers him to take him to Polis, and they make their way through several stations and tunnels, and even through the surface of Moscow itself. It's honestly one of the coolest levels when you get this snow-filled Moscow for the first time and you get to explore it and see how dangerous it is. However, a little bit after that, Bourbon is killed by bandits, pretty unceremoniously, and I think it honestly sets again the tone of the world being so bleak and kind of dark. However, Artyom meets what is probably my favorite character of almost any media ever, who's named Khan. Khan rescues Artyom. After rescuing Artyom, Khan and Artyom travels through the haunted tunnels, which are these tunnels where there's a lot of rumors in the game going around them being haunted because a lot of mysterious things happen there. However, Khan seems to have a better connection to that side of the world and manages to escort Artyom through. Again, we come to this idea of Artyom having a special bond with the world, or maybe just the Dark Ones, but these psychic elements of Metro. After escorting Artyom for a while, Khan advises Artyom to meet his contact Andrew the blacksmith, who lives under the Red Line, which is a part of the Stalinist regime. You see, very much like in real-life metros, in Metro, the metro systems are color-coded, so you have the red line, green line, and so on. And the red line happens to be where the communists live, which I think is sort of cool. It's sort of a nice little symbolism there, you know? The red line, you know, communism tends to have some red colors in them. I like it. I think it's pretty cool, honestly, even if it is kind of obvious. And with the blacksmith's help, Artyom sneaks out of the Red Line territory. Artyom is then subsequently captured by the Red Line enemies of the Fourth Reich. However, right before being executed, Artyom is rescued by 2 rangers, Pavel and Ullman. However, Pavel will die trying to escort Artyom out of the Reich territory, which eventually will end up with Artyom traveling alone. And at this point, Artyom comes across a group of survivors who's trying to stop a mutant horde from reaching Polis. However, they fail. With one exception, there's a little kid, a little boy, who Artyom helps reach Polis, basically protecting the little kid from all of the mutants, which is where he reunites with Ullman, the other one of the rangers who helped rescue him from the Fourth Reich, after they get separated. After reaching Polis, Artyom pleads with the council to help him get rid of some of the mutants as a backup plan to defend the exhibition. However, Miller tells Artyom that there's a backup plan. It's a missile silo known as D6, and D6 could destroy the Dark One's hive in the Botanical Gardens. They meet up at the Moscow State Library to find a way to find D6, essentially as it's been lost. However, they are then split up after some fights with some mutants, and this is where one of both my least favorite and favorite levels happens, known as the library. You see, the library is a little bit of a different level. You are essentially trying to stealth your way through a level where you're being haunted by extremely strong mutants who can't see you, but they can hear you. They don't really take a lot of damage from gunfire, so you might as well just save your bullets and then try to sneak past them. It's an incredibly cool idea where you have to be stealthy and slow in order for them not to hear you, because if they hear you, they will kill you. I like this idea of like this sort of a mission, and there are games that have taken it way further, like Alien Isolation, but I think a mission like that in a game can be really fun. However, I won't lie. playing this on Ranger difficulty and with not a lot of health left and whatnot can be quite scary. I won't say that I wasn't on the edge a few times, but I think ultimately that's one of the reasons why I really just love that specific level. The library is really fun, and the librarians, which are the strong mutants, are even funner to sort of avoid. It's also a really good way to show just how weak we are against the mutants. You can't really just kill some of them. They are strong, incredibly strong, and even scarily so. And I think that's just a really strong thing to re-emphasize in a world like Metro's. After Artyom locates the map, he ends up fleeing the library with the help of Miller and Ullman, and is afterwards recruited as being a ranger, and together they are joined in the operation of finding the D6 command center, which is the place that still have nukes. And after they successfully find it and clear it, making it a new base, they climb a Stankina tower to install a laser guidance system. And at this point, you sort of get the bad or the good ending. The bad ending being that you nuke the Dark Ones, basically completely destroying their home. And the good ending being that Artyom realizes that you cannot end the cycle of war and killing through more war and killing, and essentially stops the nuke from hitting. However, the real ending, the ending that the game sort of continues from, is the bad one. It is the Dark Ones getting nuked, completely wiped from existence. When speaking about the apocalypse that has happened, a character called Khan that you meet within the game says the following: "It appears that the devastation we brought upon ourselves was complete. Heaven, hell, and purgatory were atomized as well. So when a soul leaves the body, it has nowhere to go and must remain here in the Metro. A harsh, but not undeserved atonement for our sins. Wouldn't you agree?" Now, just because I like this character a lot, we'll also read another quote from him. "This can either happen right before the ending or earlier in the game, after an encounter with the Dark Ones. You reap what you sow, Artyom. Force answers force, war breeds war, and death only brings death. To break this vicious cycle, one must do more than just act without any thought or doubt." I think some of these ways of putting it, these ways of putting the words, are just so fucking poetic, and it's genuinely beautiful. Like, genuinely. And I think a lot of these sort of ideas of cycles of war bringing more war and death bringing more death is exactly what a lot of these games are about. In the good ending of Metro 2033, you stops another nuclear disaster from happening for us repeating the same history we've already been through. This time, people, or rather the powers that be, would want to bomb the Dark Ones, and you stop that. In the bad ending, you let it go through, as this is your mission. You act without thinking. All meanwhile, throughout the entire final encounter, the Dark One is asking you to surrender, to stop doing what you're doing. It is poetic in a sincerely beautiful way. But enough about me yapping about the different story elements about this game. Let's talk about gameplay. Metro 2033 can be played almost fully stealth. You can avoid most combat encounters, and while you aren't directly encouraged to doing so, it is definitely something that you probably should if you don't want to expend some ammo. Now, in my case, I decided to go headfirst in shooting most of the other people I saw. Now, this is the direct way that will lead you to a bad ending. But, needless to say, the gunplay is really fucking good here. I genuinely have to say it feels incredible to shoot. The guns, from the shotgun to the auto rifles, just feel good. Exploring the world also feels good with different things that you can find within the world. I also really like the fact that they limit the amount of weapons that you can carry on you. You can have 2 weapons at a time. That's it. And no, they don't save multiple ammo types unless you count your currency. You have those 2 weapons, no more, no less. And the reason why that is so important is that you will most certainly run out of ammo. In my case, I played the entire game on Ranger mode, which is a mode where all the enemies deal more damage, but you also deal more damage. And I gotta say, while sure I would die fast, I don't feel like the game is unfair in any way. I feel like often if I died, it would be entirely my own fault. And I really genuinely enjoyed the encounters where I fought against other human enemies. Both in that instinctual feel of shooting a gun in this game, just feeling good, but also in the way that they react and fight back. It is not exactly an easy shooter. It is one of those games that can be a little tough at times, and I think that's pretty fine. And they are counter against mutants that you will also be facing off against. I also think are fun. The different weapons that you can get definitely slap. In my case, I mostly just stuck to the standard as auto rifle and shotgun combo. The reason was that the auto rifle I could kit out with a scope and a silencer so it could borderline act like a rifle for me instead to take out much longer range targets, but the shotgun could be used against enemies that would rush me, like often mutants. And so my kit was sort of set up for the entirety of the game. Shotgun and auto rifle until the very end of the game, where you get access to an armory where you can pick whatever weapon that you want from the game. I ended up with a higher grade military rifle and another form of a shotgun, this time being 6 barrels tied to a revolver that each have a spread pellet. It is a weird but super cool design of a weapon, and this is exactly what I mean when I say some of the weapons and the ways of survival feel almost entirely improvised. And I think stuff like that is just super cool. The gun modification system is also incredibly cool. Even though it isn't super in-depth, the fact of the matter is, putting shit on a weapon always feels incredibly good in almost any game it appears in. And in Metro, it's no different. It feels really good. The level design is obviously often very dark as it takes place within a metro system. However, the times when you do go above ground and you do see the rest of Moscow in its ice-frozen state after the bombs have hit, it's genuinely beautiful. Sometimes completely breathtaking. There's a part towards the latter half of the game where you have to carry a child away from an area that's been attacked by mutants. And he will comment when you pass a crane where you can see the sky, asking if that's the sky and whether or not you can climb up to it. It is small details like that that genuinely ground the world incredibly well within these games, where different characters will comment on the fact that they haven't seen something as simple as the sky. You need to remember, the game takes place in 2033. The bombs dropped in 2013. It's been 20 years of these metro systems existing. And entire generations might have grown up all being within this post-apocalyptic world, never having seen how it was before. In Artyom's case, the main character, you can see it almost instantly as you boot up the game. He collects postcards from the post-war times. He has pictures of different tourist locations, and he ends up getting one from New York, being a picture of the Statue of Liberty that you can later find hanging on his wall. A little detail that grounds the world so much. Overall, Metro 2033 ends up being, yes, a high-octane shooter in parts, but also a deep and introspective game in other parts. It's a game that has a lot of action, admittedly, that I really tend to enjoy, but it's also a game that doesn't mind looking inwards sometimes at the different elements of its world, and I really appreciate that. And while obviously you will probably get more world building out of reading the novel in comparison to the game does a very solid job of setting up the world of Metro, of sort of painting how bleak everything has gotten. And the fact that it has all of these elements of the cycles of war and death, of force bringing force and all these things. And its entire plot is about you launching a nuclear missile against something that you just don't fully understand. Is genuinely poetic, and I think something that deserves more attention. But Metro 2033, as wonderful as it is, isn't my favorite game in the series. My favorite game will come next, with Metro Last Light. Metro Last Light was the first for a lot of things in the series. It was the first game to have a difficulty mode locked behind a pre-order bonus that wouldn't be buyable after the game came out, and was only obtainable again once the Redux version came out, which is a shame because it was deemed as the premier way to play the game. And as such, it created a lot of outrage since people wanted to play it that way and not through the suboptimal way of playing it normally. And everybody who didn't pre-order it had to obviously play normally. That would include me at the time. It's also a direct sequel to the game Metro 2033, and yet it is not a direct game translation of the book Metro 2034. It is instead its own standalone thing. Metro Last Light also takes a major political stance at this point. It's one of the games that shows a lot of the political ideas and how the different factions sort of play together and against each other within the Metro system. And within one of the very first missions in the game, you get this scene from after you've been captured by the Reich.
These prisoners were captured at the botanical gardens. Seems like they were looking for something. These two are red. They refuse to speak. The third one looks like a ranger of the order. A mutant the size of a child was caught near him. It was delivered to Reich as well.
I'll deal with it later. This one.
Suspected mutation.
No, I'm normal. See, 2 arms, 2 legs, 10 fingers. Don't you understand? I'm a Hansa citizen.
Shut up!
You're not in Hansa. Here you are a suspect in the distribution of corrupted genes. And this is your trial. If your skull has the correct proportions, you are free to go. If not, you are an abomination. Science, you see.
This is an outrage!
I told you to stay still!
Well?
Let's see. 318 millimeters by 302.
Let's look it up in the table. Ah, congratulations. You're a mutant.
No, please.
To the garbage chute. A simple question. What was your mission in the gardens?
Go to hell yourself, Nazi. Phew.
I'm gonna count to 3. 1,
Glory to the Red Line!
2,
Long live Comrade Moskvin!
3.
Please, I'll talk. But away from the other side. They'll kill me if they hear. Okay?
Take this one to the 2nd unit. Usually, Reich does not interfere with the Order's business. But here, we have you, the Reds, and the Freak, all caught in the same net. I do not like it. So talk, or take a bullet to the brain.
Get the officer! You! Here. You keep the knife. Keep it. So, you're with the Spartan Order? I'm from the Red Line. Our superiors are not on the best of terms, huh? But I say fuck that.
For some reason, this scene really got stuck in my head. And that was at a time before I could even speak English. There was no reason why this should have stuck out to me so much as a kid, but it really did, and I think it's due to the sinister design of the scene. Everything about it is just really sinister. The movements of the character, the slow pacing, and so on. And after I've grown up, and especially after playing it the last time, I gotta admit, I really also appreciate how the game handles that sort of ideology. This very clear fascistic ideology. There's no need to try to dampen it. It is shown all its ugly existence. It is shown exactly how it is. It's a guy sitting down, not being a threat to anybody, having his skull measuring in at 3 centimeters or something like that, too large, and then being shot at the accusations of being a mutant. It is really graphic, and it genuinely really shows this ideology off pretty well. And if that doesn't capture you as somebody who cares at least a little bit about the idea and sort of the thematization of the game, I really think it should. I think it's a great start to the game, but it's not the actual start. It is one of the first missions, but not the first. You see, the actual plot of Metro Last Light is taking place right after the bad ending of Metro 2033, where you launch a nuke directly at the Dark Ones. However, this is not where you start Metro Last Light. You start Metro Last Light back in D6, where Artyom is still wondering if throwing a nuke at the Dark Ones was a good idea. However, you are not allowed to think for very long, as Khan comes into the room and explains to you that there is still one more alive. One of the Dark Ones managed to survive the nuking. And Miller, the leader of the Spartan, the squad that you joined up with and took over D6 in the first game, wants it dead. But Khan believes it's the future of humanity, that it has some big role in the future of humanity, and thus you're sort of put off on a mission with Anna, Miller's daughter. Through the very first mission of Last Light, you get to see the sheer devastation that you cause these mysterious beings. You get to walk through their nuke home, and nuke that if you've played the first game, you knew you were the one to throw. And then you see what is left of them. The last one running away from you. It's a child, kinda humanoid in nature, and it's running away. And the entire first mission is you chasing it until you get to the very end of the mission where you are both captured by fascists. This is then where the mutant scene plays, and after that, the other prisoner called Pavel and Artyom manages to escape. Pavel guides Artyom through a little bit of the metro before it's revealed that he's a high-ranking member of the Red Line, or the Communist Party within the metro system. Now, just because Artyom and Pavel are friends and pals who have survived the fascist prison together, it doesn't mean that Pavel is gonna look past the fact that Artyom is a ranger, and the Rangers are a faction that fights against the communists. So Artyom gets detained again, this time so that the Red Line can learn more about the Rangers and the Dark Ones. It's also revealed that the Red Line or the Communists both have Anna and the Dark One, and of course, Artyom goes to rescue both of them. You fight your way through a bunch of communists before you end up finding another big reveal thing out. And that is that Lesinski, a Red Line spy who was undercover in the Rangers for the Red Line, managed to steal weaponized Ebola, which has already been unleashed on one station that you fight your way through. And eventually you will locate Anna and you'll both end up in quarantine to make sure that, you don't carry Ebola. Now, it is revealed that the Red Line's plan is essentially to unleash Ebola on, well, the stations, which of course would kill basically everybody within them. Now, around this time is also when the little Dark One, or the child, is starting to play a much bigger role. You start communicating with him, you start actually talking to the little Dark One, and he will learn from Artyom, and it has this like really cute dynamic where he will help you to see enemies through walls and stuff during some fights. It's all scripted and whatnot, but I like it. I really like the little guy. It's really fun. He's actually a really cool little character. I actually really ended up enjoying the bond that Artyom and the little Dark One has, especially because it's revealed that Artyom got saved by the Dark Ones initially back when he was a kid, which is why he has that bond between them, which is why they can communicate like they can. And since the Dark One can read people's mind, like sort of show their thoughts, they're also going to be using them when there's a peace meeting where a chairman of the Red Line is about to sort of talk about all this peace that they're going to bring. That there wouldn't be any more war, but the actual plan is to storm and seize E6 and unleash the virus upon the metro station, which the little Dark One helps in not happening. Now, this is also where you can sort of start to see the ending of the game. We are getting very close to it, and depending on whether or not you get the good or the bad ending, the sort of stuff changes a little bit, with the bad ending being that Artyom destroys D6 and unfortunately also himself. And it's sort of revealed that the bad ending is actually just a story being told from Anna to Artyom and Anna's son in the future after he has passed. If you get the good ending though, the Dark Ones will come in last minute and save the day, beating up the communists and saving Artyom and D6. There's also DLC for Metro. There are a few that are kind of interesting. I really like the idea of some of them, being that they sort of take the narrative perspective of the other characters. There's one where you play as Anna doing the first mission, and one where you play as Pavel and Khan for that matter, and I really like those three, even though I'm not a particularly big fan of the DLC lineup. There are also some where you play as the different sort of factions throughout the final missions. It's all pretty fun, and in the Redux at least it's completely just free. You get it as a add-on for just buying that, and I think at that point you might as well just experience them. They're pretty fun. However, overall the gameplay of Metro Last Light is really enjoyable. One of the things I appreciate most about Metro is the fact that it manages to have survival horror without directly being a horror game per se. It is much more so an action game with just some very tense moments. And if you're playing on Ranger mode, which I was, as if you buy the Redux edition or the remaster, you get it for free as an add-on and sort of bypass the entire pre-order issue that used to be a thing. And the good thing about the Ranger mode is that you do extra damage, but you also take extra damage. It's like a little two-way thing. thing. And it's really fun actually. It means that a lot of the time you don't survive a lot of bullets, you don't survive very long, and it can make certain sections, especially in the DLCs, a living nightmare. However, it's also what makes the game really fun in my opinion. You see, it keeps you on your toes at almost all times. It keeps that tension building. Whenever something is lurking in the dark, when you're here walking around wandering, the tension is there. And it's absolutely there in Ranger mode, because you know that if that thing rushes at you, you gotta shoot it fast. Or you'll have to find a way to sneak around it. Now, I'm not a big stealthy man, as you can clearly see by the gameplay on screen. I like to do the shooty shoot. And honestly, I'll be honest, it's fun. The guns feel good, the customization is deeper than the first game. There's a lot more you can do with it. And you can still use your currency as sort of a support ammunition if you so desire, which allows you to set enemies on fire. It's pretty strong actually, and something that you in general don't really want to do, even though it is strong. It is something that you do exclusively when you are in a tight position. And that is obviously because that same ammo that you're expending to get the strong bullets is also used for currency. It's a nice little trade-off, and I really enjoy games that manages that sort of thing well, and I think Metro does it really well. And I think Last Light sort of peaks that. I also really love the way it just blends it. Like, the fact that it can blend this action elements and stuff with survival horror is really fun. And it genuinely does take some restraint not to lean into complete survival horror or complete action for a game. And I think Metro sort of has that restraint, and I think it manages to balance the two elements incredibly well. And while I have talked about basically the entire story, that is not an excuse not to play Metro Last Light. It is genuinely one of the most atmospheric games ever created. And just because you know sort of the story of it doesn't mean that you understand or have been in the levels. And you should be in the levels. It is so worth experiencing. It is genuinely a masterpiece in almost every way. And if you buy the Redux, you also get the DLCs and all of that. I think it's fucking awesome. And it's one of my favorite games of all time. I absolutely love the Metro series, and especially Last Light, which is also where I started playing Metro. Metro Exodus takes place in 2035, 1 year after Last Light, and focuses on the good ending, where Artyom and D6 gets saved by the Dark Ones before they leave to find the Promised Land. I also don't mind spoiling it. This is the last time for now we'll be talking about the Dark Ones, unfortunately. However, as you might be able to imagine, in the world of Metro, after the nukes have gone off, most parts of the world would be imagined to be uninhabitable. You can't go there, they are invisible, it's too high in radiation, and there are mutants and so on. So of course the rest of the world is presumed dead. However, Artyom has this dream that he might be able to bring his people out of the Metro into the wider world. And in an attempt to find any signs of life out there, he decides to go to the surface of Moscow and scan for any signals of life, both using his radio and also just kind of walking around. And while we see some life within Moscow, everywhere else is presumed dead for a long while. However, before they can follow the train, they're captured by a little car with some Hansa soldiers and some other hostages. This is pretty essential because if you haven't played a lot of Metro before, and you might not have, it shows the brutality of the world. You see, as they drive, eventually they'll stop, and they take Artyom and the other hostages out and shoot them. However, Artyom survives. And honestly, to me, this is just the perfect opening for a game like this. It shows the brutality of the world immediately by having the main character almost shot dead. After being shot and surviving, Artyom decides to go and rescue Anna, who's been held hostage. While infiltrating the base that Anna's been held hostage at, Artyom goes through the sewer system where he ends up meeting Yarmak, another prisoner and an old train engineer who helps Artyom free Anna, and while doing that, they accidentally destroy a jamming signal that was holding signals from the outside world from reaching Moscow and the other way around. In doing so, they obviously realize that the wider world is alive, there's still more people out there. And luckily for our trio at this point, there is a locomotive right in the same station. The locomotive or the train that they saw earlier, which they of course decide to hijack. Though, while the train leaves, the Spartan Order moves in, the order that Artyom used to work with, where Miller is, and they move in to retake the train. However, they're shocked to see Artyom and Anna, knowing that Hansa would have killed them for knowing the truth. And then the big discussion is held. It turns out Miller a year earlier was briefed on the fact that there was life outside of the metro. However, it was to be kept secret because it could be the enemy. You know, the war never ended, the World War. And if they found out that there was still Russians alive in the metro, they could move in. So he hesitates a little bit with deciding whether or not to flee Moscow. However, before the big discussion can be held, Hansa isn't gonna give up that train that they just lost that easily. So they send another military-grade train after them. And they order us to stop our train. However, Miller doesn't really believe that that could go over well. So as it is Artyom that has brought this mess down upon everybody, it's also Artyom that has to clean it up. So he's given some explosives and sent to jump trains and go over there and plant them and explode the train. He does that by planting them on the engine, exploding the entire thing. And afterwards, they decide that the best chance of survival is fleeing Moscow. It's also while briefing everybody else about the fact that there are people out there in the real world and that the war might not have ended, that Miller mentions that they had received a radio broadcast in Moscow from a bunker called Moscow Defense Command, and they were calling for survivors to rally at the Ark, which is located at Mount Yamatau. And Miller decides to go there, believing that the Russian government might have rebuilt itself. However, before anybody can move too far, there's another train that approaches. And while trying to escape the train, they decide that the best course of action is for Artyom to sneak aboard the train, plant a bomb and explode that thing. And that is exactly what he does, ending up back at our own train at the Aurora right after the other train explodes. It's a really cool little mission, and I genuinely really enjoyed the feel of it in general. Very linear, teaches the mechanics of the game really well. It's pretty good. After that, you get to the first big level of Metro Exodus. You see, the title Exodus is not exactly accidental, not only because they're escaping the metro system, but also because the game opens up a lot more here. Metro Exodus is much more of a open zone type of game instead of a closed zone small linear shooter. You get a map of each area and you get to explore to your heart's content, and the maps can be quite far. They are pretty big sometimes and you'll have to run a lot. The maps are pretty big and you'll kind of just have to walk a lot in this game. They have the semi-open world thing going on, like I said, open zone, and I'm not sure if I exactly prefer that. You see, it kind of can take the atmosphere out of the game a little bit at times, and I just really didn't find myself enjoying the zones the same way I did the metro system. All of that being said, they aren't bad. The first level you get into is Volga River, which is where the Spartan crew crosses right before ending up at the bunker that they're trying to reach. However, the Volga River is controlled by a technophobic cult. And the first order for Miller is to acquire information around the Volga River, which is where they find out things like there's a cult that is technophobic. They find that out while Artyom and Anna infiltrate a church that has some signs of human life, and there are humans there. There's actually a lot. There's a cult. And at the top of the church tower, they find a mother and a daughter called Katya and Nastya. Katya, the mom, reveals that the local area is controlled by the cult that we mentioned, who's led by a guy called Salantius, who's a mad preacher that worship a giant mutated catfish, and they in general believe that electricity is a sin, since they see that technology was the thing that ended the world, and as such they've started to live without it, and will actively kill and shoot at anything they don't really understand that uses electricity. This is also where the game's moral system kicks in. You see, very much like Last Light, the moral system is determined through stealth encounters. Essentially, you can decide to go in loud, which is considered the bad option and gives you overall bad karma, or you can sneak through the levels, which gives you good karma. By sneaking through enough levels, you'll eventually get the good ending. After sneaking through the church, not killing anybody, Artyom is told to head off in search of a local mechanic called Crest. He also dislikes the fanatics, and he might be able to assist in repairing the Aurora since he is a mechanic. Artyom finds Crest in a basis made on top of a crane that is fortified so that the different mutants won't get to him, or the fanatics for that matter. He also reveals that he's been imprisoned by the fanatics for having a flashlight, which I think is kind of funny, but I digress for that. Crest is also invited by Miller to join the Aurora. However, in exchange for joining the trip, he'll need to do some repairs on the train, which he of course does. It is then revealed that Anna disappeared while being out scouting near an old radio tower. Artyom, Demir, and Sam are tasked with finding her. Near the radio tower, there appears to be what is an American flag hanging from a tree, but as Artyom gets closer, he falls through a hole in the ground into a ammo dump. This area is toxic, and it's also where he finds Anna unmasked and slowly fading away. However, he puts her mask on, saves the day again. This is also where they find some weird human mutants. I'd call them ghouls, but in the game, in one of the DLCs, they call them fucklies, so that's what we're going to be calling them. You're going to see a lot more of them, and they essentially act as slightly more intelligent zombies. After going through the entire facility, Artyom then opens the door so Sam and Demir can get in, and then they help get Anna back to the Aurora. Meanwhile, at the Aurora, Katya and Nastya has gone close to Stefan, who tries to get Miller to let them aboard the Aurora. However, Miller refuses. After refusing, Katya reveals the nearby location of a train depot that has a working sleeper carriage that they could use to live in. It is one of those carriages with beds and everything, and Crest reveals that there's a local train terminal that is hiding his rail car that they could use to move the carriage to the Aurora. Miller, however, is still hesitating, and that's because to get close to the fanatics and lower the bridge that they need to lower to get across, they'll have to hijack a boat from some traders that are friendly with the fanatics, and Miller's scared that Artyom won't be back in time. But eventually he tells Artyom as long as the traders have not yet arrived, he's free to attempt to retrieve the carriage. After arriving where the rail car is, Artyom is also informed that Kashar fish, the giant mutated catfish I mentioned before that the fanatics worship, is actually kind of living there. It's kind of its place. It's also infested with mutants, the Fuckleys to be specific. And Artyom has to fight his way through the Fuckleys and encounter with the giant fish to eventually retrieve the rail car. And one of the areas that he has to move it through to get to the sleeper carriage is a new home to the local bandits. So there's a lot of stuff for Artyom to do here. However, he does manage to complete both objectives, just as the trading barge enters the area. At this point, the plan gets set into motion. Artyom, along with Chris, Duke, Anna, and a guy who I am not joking is called Idiot, and Sam, that provides support, has to infiltrate the traders, get their barge to then infiltrate the cult, and then lower the bridge. Again, this is a pivotal moment for the story where if you decide to just go guns blazing, killing them all, it will give you negative karma as far as I understand it. And if you get out without shooting, without killing anybody, or rather without being spotted killing anybody, you'll get out with no negative karma. The way you can tell whether or not you've gotten negative karma is actually also kind of interesting. You see, it is done at the end of every chapter, with certain characters taking some sort of hit or staying behind if you have enough negative karma. This is an invisible stat, and you cannot really tell how many you have before you're at the end. But you can tell based on the cutscene. If everybody gets through just fine, it's usually because you have enough good karma. There are also missions that simply don't have any form of karma whatsoever. Between every level in Metro Exodus, there's these interlude sections, which is where the NPCs are kind of just together talking. You get to explore a little bit and talk with the different NPCs and explore a little bit more about the world and the characters. I honestly really like these. They serve as a nice break. You can look around and so on. In this one called Spring, you wake up next to Anna and you actually can decide on staying with her a bit longer, and if you do, Anna will reflect on your actions in the previous missions, both good and bad, and you'll be able to see Nastya asking Chris to teach her how to sew as he set up a workshop in the carriage. And you can also find everybody else from the crew just having a good time talking. You can find Stefan trying to riz up Katya with his guitar. I regret saying the word riz. And if you find a guitar in the previous level, you can actually also play with him. I love these small interactions. It really humanizes the crew around you a lot more. And it also hurts a lot more when some of them don't survive, depending on your choices. You see, you can actually make it all the way through the game without having your allies really die, except one. However, most of them are completely preventable. And I think that's why it's so cool to have these sections, honestly, because they entirely change depending on how you play the game, right? If you get the bad ending, which I did on my very first playthrough, certain characters just won't be around doing those interlude sections, and there'll be reflection about how you could have saved them and so on. And if you get the good ending, then, well, they'll be there talking about the events of the previous chapter. At the head of the train, Miller is sitting, and he reveals that he's managed to get in communication with the Ark. And we then get a conversation between Miller, our leader, and Major Ivanov, who honestly just straight up seems a little weird. He seems a little strange at the time, but Miller doesn't pick up on it at all. He's overcome with joy and is so happy that he gets to go and meet the big head of the Moscow military, something he's worked his entire life for. And one of the things that is revealed with Anna is that he was also a bit of an absent dad from her childhood, preferring to go out on the missions and so on. So he has literally offered his entire life up to this dream of his, and it's about to be realized. Right before reaching Mount Yamato, Miller decides to stop the Aurora, being scared that there might be some sort of roadblock ahead, or that radiation might be getting too bad, or that somebody will overtake the Aurora. So instead, they go on with a small recon team consisting of Sam, Idiot, Crest, Miller, Artyom, and Anna that go into the bunker itself, with the rest of the people staying behind at the Aurora. To the bunker. And going there, you see all of these destroyed buildings and how things become more desolate as they go. You also get to see vehicles, a lot of them just destroyed from the war. And honestly, it sets up the level really, really well. It is the slow going there that really sort of builds up the tension after hearing about Miller's dream, after seeing him so happy that he overlooks some pretty obvious signs that something isn't right. After arriving at the Yamato bunker, Miller decides that it's only Artyom, himself, and Anna that will go in to speak with the Russian government. Going up the elevator, Miller will thank Artyom for his contribution and for pushing him to achieve this dream of his. And as they enter the room, it's complete darkness. You can see a few silhouettes talking to you from behind a glass wall. And Miller initially doesn't seem fazed by this whatsoever. However, when they start to get excited about the prospect of having women and children with them, that is where Miller gets excited. And then things go from weird to bad pretty quickly. You see, it turns out that they're cannibals. They're very quickly knocked out, and Miller and Artyom are taken away to, well, be killed. However, before killing them, one of the leaders wants Miller to call in the rest of the crew on the Aurora, making them drop their weapons and sort of lying to them, saying that there's nothing wrong. He's doing this by threatening Anna's life. It's also revealed that they are living through sending these radio and distress signals out, trying to get people to come here unarmed and searching for safety to kill and eat them. But Miller doesn't quite fall for that, and I'm sure the leader at that point would have wished that he had killed Miller. You see, the rest of the crew realized that something was wrong. So, very quickly after, they sneak in and they attack. And at this point, all hell breaks loose. Miller splits up the people. Miller, an idiot, goes to the control room to capture that. Artyom has to find Anna, and Sam is opening the exit, making sure that it's ready to go and that there aren't any reinforcements arriving. This also happens to be my favorite level. You see, it is very tight. It has a corridor shooting that I really like in the other two games, and most importantly of all, it just captures the feeling of Metro so damn well. However, while I do say I like it, there are also elements I don't like. Of course, part of it is that it is all action, adrenaline pumping, rushing, guns blazing, shooting, tooting, and rock hollering. And while it's fun enough to have elements of that, I do miss that, like, stealth, going underground, you know, all of that vibe. And that's sort of not here at all. And I mean, it's for very obvious reason. You gotta rescue Anna, and you will be doing that. But you'll also shoot your way through hundreds of cannibals meanwhile. You'll be murdering them left, right, and center. The killing won't stop. The killing fields are truly out tonight, and it is that bunker. And afterwards, you are even rewarded with one of my favorite scenes of the entire game, which is Miller taking all his anger out on one of the leaders of the bunker and belittling him right before executing him. I think it's a pretty funny scene. I think it's a really well executed scene, pun intended. And while the crew gotta escape, it is pretty smooth for them. They get out with the skin intact and nothing more than a little bit of a life scare, even though they gotta plow through a extreme amount of cannibals. After Yamato, it cuts to a few months later, and the crew is now driving through the Caspian Desert. You see, the entire Caspian Sea has dried out in this world. It is a desert. It is littered with old cargo ships and so on. And it is hot here, really hot, and the crew is taking a hit. A lot of the people here are used to the freezing cold, and now they're in pretty hot areas for them, and they are getting sick, which ultimately leaves them with only 4 people in fighting form. That being Artyom, Damir, Anna, and Crest. And on top of that, they are also lacking in supplies, both fuel for the Aurora, but also water. And as they're driving through the Caspian Desert, a car drives by them, a van to be specific, with 2 bandits in that are loudly using the radio. And this is enough to get the crew to stop, to investigate a little further. And after stopping, Miller decides that the best course of action is to split the crew up. Artyom goes to check if there's anything for the van, and Demir and Anna goes out to see if there's any fuel or water. The reason why he splits them up is that if Artyom finds a trace of the van, they might also find anything that could point towards the communication centers. When you first go outside of the train in this mission, afterwards you get to find your first bandit outpost that is currently besieged by Fugleys. After you fight your way through them, Artyom links back up with Demir, who informs him there is a radar array that might be able to give some clues towards the communication center that they're trying to get to. And in the same area as the radar array, there is a lighthouse. Remember, this used to be a sea. And Miller radios to Artyom and Demir, telling them that they need to get to that lighthouse right now. You see, there's a woman up there that's being besieged by bandits, and she has offered Miller information on the facility that they're trying to get to, or the Caspian satellite array, in exchange for help. So they go there, and after fighting their way all the way up to the woman, it is revealed to be Guile, a new character that you'll meet who will be your guide through the Caspian Desert. Guile also reveals that the bandits come from the giant oil rig. You see, they have a tight grasp on water and all of the resources in the area, and they are also enslaving the local population. Guile does exactly as promised, guiding Artyom to the facility that he needed to go to find the radiation maps. It is located underground. She does, however, ask Artyom to bring back a picture of Guile and her family, which will grant you some positive karma. Guile stays at the entrance to keep the power running, along with waiting for Demir to arrive so he hasn't, he doesn't have to find all the way underground by himself. This is also why you run in with my least favorite creature of the entirety of the Metro universe, the spider bugs. You see, while they've been in the other games, I haven't talked too much about them. They have a slightly unique mechanic as to other mutants. You see, most of the other mutants you can just shoot to kill. The spider bugs, however, you are required to shine a light on them for a little bit or hit them with fire for them to turn their bellies up, at which point when they have their bellies up you can shoot them to insta-kill. It doesn't sound super bad, but when you realize how fast these spiders move, you also realize how fucking annoying it is to try to shine a flashlight on them when there's more than one. Eventually, after crawling through enough of the facility, Artyom does find the satellite maps, and he then meets up with Guile and Demir to get out of the facility again. After making it back, and it's at this point you get your first van. Congratulations, you can now drive. You have passed the license test. All you had to do was go through a bunker filled with the most annoying type of enemy in the entire franchise. It's great. have fun driving. I will be the first to say I think the driving is bad. It is not a driving system I enjoy. Maybe that's because there's a lot of bumps in the road, kind of ironic, but also really literally. And while in the air you have almost no control of the car, which means that eventually after driving around for a little bit, my car fell on its head. So I would walk around for the rest of the level. Miller tasked Idiot with decoding the maps, and Artyom and Demir to infiltrate the local water source and get some water for the crew. You can do this immediately or you can explore a little bit. In my case, I did pretty much just immediately go to the mission point. Here, Artyom and Demir will meet in an abandoned village built into a cave system, where Demir talks about how he regrets not having arrived sooner to help his people, and note how fast everything went to shit in the area, with the cave systems literally having paintings that are more akin to Neanderthals. Albeit, in my personal opinion, they are kind of pretty, and I really like this element where you're going through this underground city. I think it hits really well on some fantasy vibes. It just looks really good, I gotta be honest. Super satisfying, even though there isn't a lot going on there other than a small amount of mutants that you kill. After going through the cave, eventually they reach the encampment that they gotta infiltrate, which is where Damir and Artyom splits up, with Artyom being tasked with getting the controls to the gate so he can open them, and Damir driving and getting the truck out of there. This is again where you get a moral decision. You can kill as many people as you want if you really want to. You can go in fully loud if you really want to. However, going in stealth is probably your safer option and is the one that rewards good karma. And there are elements I like here a lot. You have some of the slaves that these bandits have who will realize what's going on, that you're might not necessarily there to help them, but they can use this as the perfect opportunity to escape if they just don't yell out about you. Of course, there are also some of them that are so brainwashed, that have been born so far into this, that they immediately start screaming upon seeing you, not wanting you to attack them. And I think the details here are really heartbreaking, as you can hear how the speech have also degraded, with them sort of talking in much more simple sentences. And after you make your way through that station and you have seen a lot of the horrors that these bandits have committed, you open the gate and jump on top of the driving car with all the water. And Artyom catches some shut-eye while they're going back to the station. However, after some hours of Artyom sleeping, he wakes up to a firefight right at the Aurora. You see the bandits have decided to attack. However, they are made quick work of. And at this point, Miller is kinda tired of it. Fuck the desert, fuck these bandits, I'm out of here. However, we need some fuel before we can get the Aurora back and running. To do so, you'll have to infiltrate the Baron's fortress and steal a rail car full of fuel. Demir, Artyom, and the new girl, Guile, does exactly that. Guile, having been there longer, shows a better way to get in. Again, here you can go in gun spacing, but pretty sure it will cost you some karma. You infiltrate it through the sewer system and eventually end up on top. However, the Baron does catch you, and he thinks there might be a chance for you to work together. You see, bandits kind of know that again they are kicked out there. However, the Baron will give Artyom and the crew all the oil in that tank. All they have to do is give up Guile, the freedom fighter who's trying to save the local people. But before you can reach any agreement or before anything is said, even if there was a choice here, shots ring out. You see, and Guile is still there. And immediately, because she is pretty cool, she kills two of the guards and the Baron runs and hides. She tries to get to him. This will have a little bit of a shooting section where you're just kind of standing in the big room that the Baron built for himself in his own glory, killing people as they come running at you. And it also takes you to the end of the mission. After doing this, you open the door, and Guile says essentially that she's gonna stay behind. She's been fighting for many years and she can't leave herself with her people, being enslaved. She wouldn't want that. So she decides to stay behind. If you get the bad ending, Demir stays with her. If not, he comes with you. And at this point, they head out. After this level, you get another one of the sort of social talking levels. I really like these. I also like the interludes on the other stations in the other games. I really like it when you just slow the game down a little bit and you get to explore the different characters. Here you again get the chance to talk a little bit with Anna before leaving. When you're leaving, You go out to get some food, and it is revealed that Stefan has proposed to Katja, and they're all celebrating. There's a little song that starts to play, and all of a sudden, Anna passes out. As she comes to, she reveals that the doctor at Yamato, the cannibal, actually mentioned that she has a lung problem and that she is sick and could die, which is also what sets the next few missions in motion. You need to go and find some medicine for Anna while also figuring out where to go to build a new life for you and the crew. The next main mission is called Touch, which is a forest level. You see, the crew has gone desperate for a place to settle down, to relax in. But Miller is scared of repeating the same mistake that he did at Yamato, so he sends Artyom and Alicia to scout a forested valley, as this might be a place that they could actually settle down free from radiation and so on. They take the rail car that we got in the very first level. However, while making your way there, the railroad that you are driving on collapses, with a giant rock hitting it. After a bit, we don't know how long, Artyom is dragged out by a woman who's called Olga. She says she knows that Artyom and Alicia aren't just ordinary bandits and will help them out, as long as they don't do anything stupid. Going through a little bit of level, in the very beginning of it, you will find yourself a crossbow. You see, all of your other equipment has washed away, and as you make your way through the forest, you will eventually encounter one of the factions there. They are known as the Children of the Forest, and they were former students who were studying at the summer school before the outbreak of the war. They still follow the words of their teacher, who attempts to ensure safety and the sanctity of the valley. However, they are split apart. There's the pioneers and the pirates, and both are interpreting the words of the teacher differently. The pioneers are led by Olga and are more peaceful, hunting the local wildlife and only turning their weapons on bandits, while the pirates are led by Roman and they are far more hostile, wanting to kill both Spartans. Here you again get some of the moral choices, and it's again just caught between stealth or not stealth. If you kill all the guys, go in guns blazing with your crossbow, steal their weapons and shoot them, it's not stealthy and it will be considered their bad ending and give you bad karma. If you go through it stealthily, not killing them, knowing that they're just a different group of people, you'll get the good ending. I also find the dichotomy between the factions kind of interesting. The idea that they are both descendants of the same teachings, they still both fundamentally believe the same things, but have interpreted the teachings of the teacher differently, does have some real-life symbolism to things like religion, where people might read the same scripture into completely different ways. I find it to be just a general interesting way to design a level. But not only that, the level is just really fucking fun to explore. They have these tree houses, and you can sort of go up to them and you can use ropes and shit to get around. It's really fun. And the crossbow is incredibly good. It is strong, it hits hard, and it is stealthy. After making your way past a few of the camps, it is revealed that Alicia was briefly captured but ended up escaping with the help of Olga, the same woman that saved Artyom. As you have sneaked your way through a bunch of camps, you end up trying to get on top of an old church. However, here you have your second run-in with a bear. You'll see, very much like in Metro Last Light, there is a bear boss fight. This is almost tradition at this point. The bear boss fight honestly plays pretty much the exact same as in the other games. You shoot it, it runs after you, you run away from it, turn around, shoot it again, run away from it, try to light it on fire. Eventually it will run away. And after climbing on top of the church tower, you meet Olga again. If you want to, you can stay a little bit with Olga and learn some more lore about the pioneers and the children of the teachers and so on. You can also learn about the teacher and visit his grave. However, to get to where you have to be to get back to the Aurora, you'll have to pass through a pirate base. This is where I kind of fucked up and ended up getting shot at, but I just kind of ignored it and continued to swim. After that, you'll end up with the pirate's former leader called the Admiral. The Admiral has been handicapped due to fights. He can no longer walk and is confined to a wheelchair. He refuses to give up the sawmill, and you'd initially think that there's more people than him up there. But after eventually making all your way up there, powering up the sawmill again so you can use the elevator to get up to him, it is revealed that one, he is in that wheelchair, and two, the two other people that you hear talking is him making other voices and the people are dead. He has kind of lost his mind. Honestly, he's one of the cooler characters. As you sit down and have a drink with him and a smoke, you can play the guitar for him, and sort of just listen to him ramble for a little bit. He seems like a genuinely nice guy, honestly. But it's just a really fun little detail that I really enjoyed, is just talking to these NPCs, learning their stories and learning about them. After he falls asleep, though, you make your way further ahead. You leave the sawmill behind, and you end up through another spider-infested tunnel. God damn it, I fucking hate the spiders. They are genuinely fucking annoying. And because of the high amount of radiation, you can't really use your electricity. You can't use your flashlight, so you will have to sort of just shoot them with either fire, attempt with a lighter, or just run for your life, which is what I did. After navigating the tunnels, after making your way through the tunnel, initially shocked that you are alive and attempts to attack you, as he doesn't realize that you are Artyom. After he stops attacking you, after realizing that you are actually Artyom, he reveals that the forest valley is in danger due to the high amount of radiation behind the dam that it's built behind, and it might collapse soon, which would decimate the valley and the people there. After reaching the top of the dam and having the conversation with Alicia and Artyom make their way through the rest of the city, towards the church at the point of the city. When they're at the point of the city, their idea is that they can zipline across to get to the Aurora. However, before they ever get a chance to do that, the master of the forest, the bear, attacks them yet again. And the boss fight is pretty much the same as it was before. You shoot it with fire to stun it for a little bit. Once it's stunned, you shoot it some more, then it attacks you. You just kind of run away from it when it attacks you, and then when it has attacked, you then shoot. The only difference here is that there are buildings around and it can run through them, completely decimating them if it wants to. So you can't really hide inside of them, but that's also about it. They then zipline across the dam, get into the Aurora. Here is again where you can have differing endings here. If you have not killed anybody and you have been non-bloodthirsty, you have made your way more or less stealthily across the entire map, Alicia goes with Artyom. However, if you haven't done that, while ziplining across, the pioneers will appear, both pirates and the children of the forest, and eventually they'll attack because you have been bloodthirsty, and Alicia will be hit and killed, which is why he wouldn't continue with the train if you don't get the good ending. However, if you haven't been bloodthirsty and you make your way through the level stealthily, Alicia does survive across the entire zipline, and he also gets to warn Olga about the oncoming doom of the valley. After the crew finds out that the hydraulic dam will eventually fail and will flood the valley, they decide to continue towards Novobrodsky. Because after Katya went through her mother's notes, she found out that an experimental military-grade drug, Renegan F, was produced there, and it might be able to help Anna. It might be her only hope, matter of fact. This is one of those levels where you do have the chance to just go and explore with the crew and talk to them. It is also your final time to do that, as we are rapidly approaching the end of the actual game. So if I do, and I got to this point, I probably will. You'll find people like Idiot having some bad news, and having studied the radiation map, he's learned that the radiation levels are marked as green on the map, and purple indicates errors, which also reveals that Novobrodsky, which they thought was radiation-free, is actually extremely radiated. You can find Quest and Yermak discussing the railway museum, where Yermak reveals that there is an experimental snowplow in that museum, and as it's getting close to winter, the crew could use that to continue their travels. Miller decides that the crew again splits up. Miller and Artyom goes towards the medicine. As Miller puts it, it is Artyom's wife and it's his daughter. Meanwhile, Stefan, Quest, Sam and Idiot is sent to search for the secondary goal, that being the snowplow. This is a bit of an interesting level. You see, it is entirely linear, and it's the first time in basically all of the game except the second chapter where things were super linear. You say your farewells on the train and you get suited up. You see, you need to wear more protection as the radiation levels are extreme here. And then you leave with Miller in the van that you got from the Caspian level. It starts out with Miller driving and then eventually switches to being Artyom that drives. They plan to travel through the metro system after getting there, however, the first one that they find is inaccessible, just due to the sheer amount of ice and snow that's built up there over time. Which is when they enter a different route to a metro and they go through that. Now, this should be familiar to anybody who has played Metro and happens to be one of those callbacks that I really enjoy. Traveling through the Metro system again at the end of Exodus, the third game, felt incredible, and the first time I played it, it was really exciting as a callback to the older games. However, after traveling for a bit, Miller and Artyom will start to notice that there are signs of war around. People are dead, something has happened here. And after a little bit, they see a little boy called Krill, who initially runs from them, but eventually after being caught, leads them home. You see, Krill survived a uprising and his father was also a lieutenant in the OSCOM unit, and they were the only two survivors after riots overran the station. However, you see, Krill's dad left to another station that might have a map of what is potentially a habitable area, a place for him and his son to settle down. However, he hasn't returned. Miller decides that Artyom can go and get the medicine by himself, and then Miller will take the wheels and go and attempt to find that map of a place to stay. They wish each other luck. You get to pick up Miller's rifle, which is incredibly strong, and then you're off. After fighting through the tunnels, find a few mutants, you eventually get to a giant building, which is why you should see a familiar face. You see, not only is there a lot of radiation here, and it's something that you'll definitely see the effects of as you play, you'll also get to face another librarian, the giant enemy from the beginning, the end of Metro 2033, when you had to get the map. However, in Metro Exodus, they are a lot weaker. The first one you meet, I decided to fight it, normally just shooting it, and eventually I killed it. It didn't take a lot of bullets either, it just took, well, it did take a lot of bullets, but it didn't take that many bullets, you know? I thought it was unkillable, but here I was killing it. You can get through the level in the exact same manner that you did in Metro 2033 by sneaking and hiding your way through the level, and it is genuinely encouraged to do so because you don't have ammo for all of them, and it's kind of a waste of time. You can, however, also do what I did, which is just sprint through the different doors hoping for the best. And that also can work as you are slightly faster than them. However, after making your way to the basement of the building, you do find the medicine, not before one of the big librarians get to you. You attempt to escape, however, the radiation and the fight with the librarian has exhausted Artyom a lot, and the librarian is eventually killed by a falling ice spike. And getting back to normal ground, Artyom also falls down. And you presume him dead if it wasn't for the fact that Miller comes at the last second rescuing Artyom, along with Krill. They drive back, but Artyom fades in and out of consciousness, and so does Miller. Eventually, Miller stops waking up again, and Artyom takes the wheel, driving and driving and driving, and eventually you get to the clearing where that was supposed to be picked up. And Artyom gets out of the car with the medicine, falls on the ground, and as he does, you can hear the train approaching. It is revealed that Artyom does survive. If you have the good ending, then everybody donates blood, so Artyom eventually survives the radiation sickness he's suffering from, but Miller dies. And with that, you reach the end of Metro Exodus. It is sort of hinted at / revealed that there is a habitable area that the crew can live in, meaning that Miller's sacrifice trying to find the map wasn't entirely in vain. And that is the end of the game, and also the end of the story so far. There is a side story in the VR game, but from what I hear, it isn't fantastic. However, just like Last Light, Metro Exodus also got DLC. Now, maybe it's just me, but I find some of this DLC to be kind of whack, not the best out there. There are 2 pieces of DLC. One is called The Two Commanders, and the other one is called Sam's Story. And The Two Commanders is, in my opinion, from a story perspective, the best one, even though it is much shorter. It follows Krill's dad, in contrast with Miller, through the same events of the game. You see, as the crew's traveling, there are also things that are happening at the OSCOM station. And it is revealed that Krill's dad along with almost the rest of the station, was tracked by the leading government, as the medicine that they were using, the experimental medicine that Artyom finds more of, they've run out of, and they needed to survive there because of the high radiation levels. So the leaders plan to attempt to make an escape while they'd leave everybody else behind. It is much longer than that, and it's made much better by just playing the DLC, and the dialogue is actually kind of worth it. In general, it is my favorite, but that's also because the plot is just kind of good. I really enjoyed it, and I also really like learning more about Krill. It's also revealed that Krill's dad leaves to find the map to find a place for them to live, right? And he actually just finds that map, and he almost brings it out before succumbing to the radiation poison, which is where Miller finds it, and he sits down to have a conversation with the dead guy. It is honestly kind of heartbreaking, and it's one of the really more heartfelt moments in the game. I really like the DLC. The other one is Sam's story. Sam's story is definitely the bigger of the two DLCs. However, it manages to be my least favorite, and that is in large part due to the plot. You see, while the two generals have this more heartfelt story about Krill and his dad and the degradation of the station and how fast things went, Sam's story is more of a traditional level. It follows Sam as he attempts to get back to his home country of America, as he's from San Diego, and he is convinced that his dad is still waiting there. So he wants to get back home. And to do that, he needs to find somebody who can take him there. And he does see a sick-ass submarine that he, along with the captain and a guy called Tom, attempts to get working. You see, Tom is another American that made that before the war. He was dealing in arms and is a businessman at heart. He has the sidekick, Lim. And you see, Sam wants to get home. The captain doesn't want to help Tom, and Tom wants the captain's help to refuel the submarine so he can take off. You see, the submarine does have a nukes on it, and he thinks he can effectively use it to rebuild a superpower, which he realistically probably could. The captain sees this as being immoral, bad, and he doesn't think that the cycles of war can end with more war. And you kind of get to decide who you believe more in throughout the DLC. The area itself is pretty interesting. You get to have a motorboat in it, and it's kind of cool. It's kind of rad, but I don't know. Something about it just isn't the greatest to me. I think part of it is the fact that if you play like I do with Russian voice acting, the voice of the main character Sam seems off. And if you play with English voice acting, the voice acting of the rest of the people is just English with the heavy Russian accent. I'm not exactly positive about any of that. Sam also acts much more like a traditional superhero, being all loud and obnoxious and commenting every other time you pick something up. It is pretty annoying, and eventually after you've heard, I can use this enough, you kind of have enough of it. And maybe it's because I understood it when he said it, and because I played the game in Russian, I just didn't pay attention to it when Artyom said it. I don't know, man, but it just didn't get the right vibe at all. I did eventually swap to English because I just found that dealing with the enemies having a funny accent was made infinitely better than dealing with the half American, half Russian speak that they were doing before. So that was a personal decision on my side. The DLC story itself is pretty good. I really do like the captain. He's written really, really well, and I think the idea of having a atom bomb being the sort of main plot point again was kind of fun. I'm also a big fan of just the general look of the DLC. Having this giant, like, old-ass submarine that just looks cool, dude. You cannot get away from that, like, visual of it. It is nice. It is good looking. And Klim and Tom act more like these gangsters, which is also kind of what they are. And it's kind of fun. It's kind of nice, I'm not gonna lie. However, Tom can't get in contact with the captain, and the captain's the only one who knows where the fuel is. So he sends Sam, who have agreed to help Tom on the condition that Tom will use the submarine to take Sam back home to find the captain. And eventually they become friends. You have like an entire drinking scene with them, and it's pretty funny. It's nice and all that. But after a long time, the captain does agree to help Tom, as he really doesn't see that being any other way around it. It's either that he helps him now, and maybe can get Sam helps in the future to stop whatever Tom is planning, or he can let Tom find the fuel rods himself, which he eventually will. It's revealed by the captain that the fuel rods, nuclear rods, are located in an old Russian Navy commando base. However, the bunker is radioactive, and to get through that bunker, you'll have to find some hazmat suits, which are a fire department building. They are located there, so you go and get them. Then you go meet up with the captain again, go into the bunker, and try to get these fuel rods. However, while being there are these electro spiders, and they're essentially like the old spiders, except these turn off all electricity. This is where having fire bullets is very, very handy, as shooting them twice with that will almost instantly kill them. It is definitely the way to go when you're fighting them, and they are incredibly annoying, as it means that you can't use your flashlight to make all of the other spiders go away. After getting the fuel, the captain and Sam decides to head back to Tom and deliver it. But before getting there, while they're opening the gates to let the captain in, the captain decides to have a conversation with Sam, essentially pleading that he explode the fuel rods. He has put bombs on them, he can get rid of it now, bury the entire submarine in the past, and make sure this doesn't happen, like that Tom can't use the submarine to kill anybody else. But before they get that far, the talks break down, and Clem revolts against Tom. You see, Clem doesn't really believe Tom either that he won't use it. He believes that he will have to use the nuclear warheads. That's just how it is. So Clem attempts to take the power for himself. He also overheard Tom talking about killing him after they make it back. And as such, Sam's final objective is set in motion. You have to go and open the gate for the rest of the crew to make it out in the submarine. You see, the talks haven't even started yet. And as you make your way through, you'll be shooting some rebels. It's a really fun level. Genuinely really enjoyed it. Reminded me a lot of some of the earlier levels in Metro Exodus. Absolute banger. Loved it. Making your way through the level, eventually, you reach the guard tower and get to opening the gate after having a low fight with Clem and getting stabbed in the process. You are then prompted with whether or not you believe Tom the businessman will never use the nukes, only use them as a way to threaten people, or you are more likely to believe the captain that he is absolutely gonna nuke somebody if we let him go away. In my playthrough, I decided to blow him up, believing that he would absolutely use the nukes. And that sort of just ends that expansion. It is kind of left up to interpretation whether or not Sam is actually still alive after it. There is a voiceover, but whether or not that means that he's alive or that means he died sitting on that dock, that's really up to interpretation. There are a few other interesting things that are revealed, such as the fact that the Fuckleys can be used as a sort of labor force, like they are intelligent enough to do stuff. However, you just need to keep them kind of bound up, which is a trait some of the bandits have started doing. I also have to point out here at the end of Exodus that I really disliked the role that Anna ended up playing in the story. In the first two games, she seemed kind of cool. She was a sniper, she was Miller's daughter, and she was, let's just be real, really good with a gun. Whereas in this game, she's kind of reduced to the role of Princess Peach in Super Mario. She's getting kidnapped left, right, and center, and if she isn't being kidnapped, she's getting sick. Not my favorite thing, I just think it's a weird evolving of the character. I think it's the same thing with Miller, who goes from being really friendly to Artyom to a borderline hate relationship by the end. I don't really get that entire thing. I think, however, that the ending of Miller kind of redeems his character a lot more than something like Anna's does for her. We'll see what the future brings for Metro though. Metro Exodus also holds an excellent crafting and building system where you can run around and scavenge for resources and then use that to build ammo and med packs and whatnot. That also results in the fact that med packs can be kind of rare unless you craft them, as you don't or rarely find them out in the wild outside of the DLCs. You can also just swap freely between weapons and all that. That is all free to do, that doesn't cost any scrap or anything like that. However, actually creating bullets and ammo and the medkits, that does cost extra. And it's something that I have a love-hate relationship towards, because on one hand, I think it's a nice system. On another, I think it's both too simplistic to exist in the way that it does, and I like the old games systems of just being a trader a lot more. As in Exodus, you can at times just completely run into a dry streak with things like health packs and there not being a crafting bench have them bench near you, so you just kind of run out of them and you have to play really funkily to get around it, or die. I really don't know how to feel about the system, but overall, especially the gun customization, it's still here and it's even better. After all is said and done, how is the Metro series? Well, overall, I think it's fantastic. The first two games are dark and gritty and they're set in these tunnels that I get absolutely lost in while playing them. I love the series a lot. It is one of the series that kickstarted my love for the post-apocalypse, and not the sort of fun post-apocalypse either, the grim dark one. I really enjoy the games. They can play kind of similarly in the sense that they are all first-person shooters, but you can definitely see the improvements as you go through the game, with of course 2033 being the oldest one. However, I have to say, maybe it's because it's my first game, maybe it's because it's the best one, I don't know, but my favorite is Last Light. I really genuinely love that game. The setting, the story, having the dark ones be a part of it. It's just so interesting, all of it, and it manages to keep you at the edge of your seat the entire time, which is something that I feel like Exodus kind of fails at a little bit. It is, in my opinion, just a slightly worse game, mainly due to the fact that they attempted to do these open zones and just didn't do them super well. They did them well enough, and I like Exodus. It's just that if you put a gun to my head and ask me which one was the better one, I would answer Last Light. There is, like I mentioned, also a VR game. I have not played it mainly because my VR headset, I can't get it to work, so here we are. But from what I understand, it's more of a spin-off type of thing, and it's kinda mediocre from the reviews I could find. But the big thing is that they are making a new Metro game. This is not the final part of the saga of the games. It seems like you're playing as Hunter, the guy that left at the very beginning of Metro 2033, and I think it looks really good. I am very interested in it. It looks like it's going back to the Metro system, because funnily enough, when you take the Metro out of Metro, the games sort of suffer. But I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be an absolute banger game. And as for the books, while I haven't read them, they are actually available online, or at least 2033 is, and I do recommend you go and check that out. I'll leave a link to it in the description. I will also be getting the paperback versions of them myself. I think they are interesting. I think the world is interesting, and I think Dmitry as a writer is incredibly talented. He's a man who suffered a lot for his beliefs. He has had to be exiled from his own country for believing that an attack against a foreign nation is not good. In my opinion, he deserves all the respect in the world. He's a genuinely talented man and is a genuinely talented author who've managed to make a setting that is intensely interesting, that both have magical monsters, but also the very real monsters that lurks within different ideas and the dangers of those ideas. And it looks like he's gonna continue it. He's also a forward-thinking author, I'd say, as he himself has chosen to have his game adopted into, a video game. It's not something that he had to do, but he decided to do it, and I think it's fucking cool. I think Metro as a series is a must-play if you haven't. If you consider yourself a fan of first-person shooter games like that in that general vicinity, go and play them. If not, then find some other way to experience them. I have gone over the plot elements in general here. I still think there are a lot more for you to find out by yourself by just playing the games. And I think at this point you probably should. They're getting pretty old, and there's a new one coming out. There's never really been a better point to jump in and check out the series, because it is really fun, really good, and it's just an absolute joy to play. With all of that being said, this has been an example of the sort of long-form content that I do want to make more. I have loved making this video, even though it took me a lot longer to make. It's still been a really fun experience, and it's something that I hope to do more of in the future. I already have another one in the cooking book, and I'm working on that. And I also have been thinking about making a separate channel specifically for this video, so they don't get sort of put together with all my shorter form content, the 10-20 minutes discussions on different things, or talks about different games, because while that's fun, I do like the idea of being able to produce these long form videos. Let me know what you think about that in the comments if you feel so inclined. I'd love to get some feedback on it, positive or negative. Just any words on it would be nice so I have somebody to discuss that with. And lastly, I want to thank you if you've made it this far for listening to me ramble about a series I really like a lot in a format I haven't tried doing before. Thank you a lot. I genuinely really appreciate it. I hope I make more things like this in the future. But for now, that has been it for me. If you liked the video, do the YouTube stuff. Not, that's completely fine. I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye.